I remember the day they told me I was wasting my life. I was just 15 then, standing in the cramped corner of the living room, clutching the battered violin my grandfather had left me. It was cracked, dusty, and looked like it hadn't been played in decades. My family sat around the dining table, voices rising in a chorus of dismissiveness and disdain. "You're fooling yourself," my father snapped, glaring at the violin as if it were a cursed object. "You think you're going to make a living fixing those old things? That's a pointless hobby, a sideshow. You are better off doing something real, going to college, getting a decent job, something that matters." My mother shook her head, her eyes narrowing. "All you do is waste your time with those stupid instruments. When will you grow up?" And my brother, smirking, added, "Honestly, I don't know what's more embarrassing, your obsession or your delusion. No one's going to take you seriously if you keep chasing after fairy tales." It wasn't just words. It was a verdict. A dismissal that echoed like a thunderclap in my chest. I felt the shame bloom inside me, a heavy, suffocating weight. I was cast out that day, not just from the house, but from their belief in me, in my dream. I didn't run away, not exactly, but I did turn inward, swallowing the hurt and ridicule. I knew they thought I was wasting my life, that I was destined to be a failure, an embarrassment to everything they stood for. But beneath that pain, a stubborn seed of resolve took root. I poured myself into restoring those old violins. Day after day, I learned to breathe new life into cracked wood, to coax trembling strings into song. I studied every detail, every nuance, driven by something deeper than validation, by a love for the craft, the music, the history woven into each instrument. Years passed. The first major breakthrough came when I restored a battered Stradivarius that had been abandoned in a dusty attic. When I finished, I played it. The tone rich and pure, vibrating with the stories of centuries past. Word spread. Small circles of musicians found me, trusting me with their treasured instruments. My reputation grew. But the real turning point arrived when I was invited to restore a legendary violin, the Lunaria, a masterpiece lost to time and neglect. It was in terrible shape, a shadow of its former glory. I spent months painstakingly repairing cracks, replacing worn-out wood, polishing varnish that had darkened with age. Every stroke of my tools was a whisper of hope, a prayer to revive its soul. When I finally played the Lunaria again, its voice soared like a phoenix rising. The sound was transcendent, breathtaking. It was as if the violin itself had been waiting all these years for someone to bring it back to life. And then I did something I'll never imagined. I invited my family to witness the revival. I told them I had a surprise, that they should come to my studio. They came, skeptical and silent, their faces tight with the familiar mixture of disbelief and pity. I led them into the workshop, where the air was thick with the smell of varnish and old wood. I handed my father the Lunaria. He hesitated, then hesitantly drew the bow across the strings. The sound burst forth, full and vibrant, filling the room with its pure, piercing tone. My mother's eyes widened. My brother looked stunned, unable to hide his shock. They had come expecting to see a foolish hobby, a failure, a joke. But instead, they saw what I had become. In that moment, I felt a wave of clarity. I was no longer the girl who'd been dismissed, who'd been told she was wasting her life. I was a master of my craft, a creator of beauty and history. I had turned the wreckage of a broken violin into a vessel of emotion, and in doing so, I had healed parts of myself I never knew were wounded. The room fell silent as I took back the violin, the sound still echoing in the air. I looked at them, tears threatening to spill. I saw the flicker of shame and awe on their faces, the realization that their words, so sharp and final, had only fueled my fire. "You called this pointless," I said softly, voice trembling with emotion. "You told me I'd fail. But I spent years rebuilding what was thought was trash. I've brought to life what you said was worthless. And now this," I gently placed the violin down, "is my proof that passion, perseverance, and belief in myself can turn the impossible into reality." My father looked away, swallowing hard. My mother's eyes shimmered with tears she refused to let fall. And my brother looked away, perhaps realizing the cost of their doubt. That day, something changed. Not just for me, but for them too. They saw me, not as the silly girl with a useless hobby, but as someone who had transformed her pain into purpose, her dreams into triumph. And I knew then, deep in my soul, that the greatest victory isn't just in the restored violins. It's in the awakening of self-worth, the recognition of your own resilience, and the undeniable truth that no one can define your limits but you. Today, I run a workshop that restores not only instruments, but hopes. I've turned barren land into lush forests, planting life where nothing seemed to grow. Metaphors for what I've done with my own life. I am proof that even the harshest rejection can be the fertile ground for a profound rebirth. And here's what I want you to remember. Never let anyone's words strip you of your dreams, because sometimes the greatest victories come after the deepest wounds. Sometimes the broken pieces of your past are precisely what you need to build a future so bright, so full of meaning, that those who doubted you can only watch in awe. And maybe, just maybe, finally understand. Because in the end, what's truly important it's what you believe about yourself and how fiercely you fight for that belief. That's where real magic happens. That's where the soul finds its voice and makes it sing.